Hello, welcome to the Manasplained podcast. I'm Connor, and today I'll be talking about Axelrod Gunnarson and the two decks I built for him. I started building one deck, realized that going down that rabbit hole is going to lead to nowhere, so then I pivoted and built a different deck instead, and I think talking about both of them is going to be really interesting today. So Axelrod Gunnarson costs 4 generic, 2 black, and 2 red, so 8 mana for a legendary creature giant. That's a 5/5. It has trample, and it says each time a creature is placed in the graveyard during a turn in which Axelrod Gunnarson damaged it, you gain 1 life, and Axelrod does 1 damage to target player. So basically, whenever Axelrod Gunnarson does damage to a creature, if the creature dies that same turn, you gain a life and you get to hit a player for 1 damage. The problem is this does nothing. He doesn't have Death Touch, so that's nothing. If they decide to not block when you attack, it does nothing. And also, it's literally you gain a life and it does 1 damage. And it happens so infrequently. This card is even worse than Arcades. I didn't even know that was possible. Oh my god, this card is so bad. So the original deck I tried to design for him would be so that you could use him to ping down other creatures with, like, just tap him, deal damage to a creature, and hopefully he'll kill it. The problem with that effect is that normally auras that can do that, or even Thornbite Staff, only lets you deal 1 damage to a target, and then that usually won't kill most things, so then you'd have to give Axelrod Gunnarson Death Touch. The problem with doing all that together is that's a lot of steps to walk through to just deal 1 damage to someone and gain a life. You have to find an aura or an equipment that'll let Axelrod Gunnarson ping something. Then you also have to equip him or enchant him with something else that'll give him Death Touch. It's 2 hoops to jump through that are hard to do, that suck, because there's not enough effects, there's not a critical mass of effects in order to do all of it, so you have to run tutors. I don't like tutors. So at the end of the day, I was like, that is just not going to work as a deck, so instead I built a giant tribal deck. So even though I made a giant tribal deck, I didn't leave Axelrod Gunnarson out in the cold, because I still wanted the deck to have effects that let you use him in a way that's like cool and interesting, because he doesn't synergize with giant tribal like at all. A little bit, but not really. So being a 8 mana 5/5 doesn't really lead to like a good stat line for his cost, so yeah, he just doesn't synergize with giant tribal in that way. But at the same time, I did leave some effects in that'll let him deal damage equal to his power to another permanent or another target or something, so that you could still kill creatures with Axelrod to get the 1 life and deal 1 damage to target player. Now, it's a long walk for a really tiny glass of water, but it's still a unique effect, and I wanted to lean into that because I want these decks to feel uniquely built to their commander and not just like a generic giant tribal deck for any giant that has black and red in it. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this deck, if I should have taken it a different way. Again, cards I should have added, cards I should have removed, all that stuff. I'd love to talk with you down in the comments. So this deck consists of 10 draw spells, 10 ramp spells, 12 removal, 4 board wipes, 38 lands, 20 cards that fit the theme, 8 cards that fit the sub-theme, 5 synergy cards, and 3 protection cards. Now all of that together equals 111 cards, because I have 11 crossover cards, which are cards that fit into multiple categories at the same time. So the theme of this deck, you guessed it, is giants. The problem with this is it's a Rakdos deck. It's black and red, and there's not a lot of great giant cards to fit like the giant tribal theme in black. Lorwyn, which was the original like super tribe set or whatever, where there was a ton of different tribes, had giants in them, and they were red and white. And since red black, you can't run any of those white giants, which are also great cards. And then newer giants have also been like blue and red, so you can't run any of the blue giants either, or the blue-red giants. So yeah, the theme is filled with a ton of red cards and 2 giants that are black. So because I have 20 giants in the deck, I'm going to go through 5 giants at a time. Bonecrusher Giant, Surtland Flinger, Bloodshot Cyclops, Cunning Giant, and Inferno Titan are all giants that have very consistent removal. Bonecrusher Giant can deal 2 damage to any target as an instant, and then you can cast it later as a 4/3 for 3, which is a fantastic rate. And if he ever becomes the target of a spell, it deals 2 damage to that spell's controller, which is awesome. Surtland Flinger, whenever it attacks, you can sacrifice another creature, and then you get to fling that creature, which is deal damage to any target equal to its power. Deadshot Cyclops, you can tap it to fling a creature. Cunning Giant is whenever you deal damage that's unblocked, or when you attack with him and he isn't blocked, you get to deal 4 damage to any creature that opponent controls. So they have to chump block, or else you get to point that damage at their more important pieces, which is very good removal, actually. You'll force people to block this. And then Inferno Titan, whenever it attacks or enters the battlefield, you get to do 3 damage divided between 1, 2, or 3 targets. So you could kill like a 1 and a 2 drop, or you could hit someone in for the face for 3. All of these 5 cards are very good removal because like Bloodshot Cyclops and Surtland Flinger can use creatures to kill other stuff that don't really have any more use after they've done what they need to do on the battlefield. So besides Cinderheart Giant, the other 4 here all deal damage to multiple targets at once. Tectonic Giant and Quakebringer both deal damage to each of your opponents, Tectonic Giant dealing 3 and Quakebringer dealing 2. And they're both repeatable. Quakebringer is every upkeep while he's on the battlefield or in the graveyard while you have a giant out. And Tectonic Giant is on attack or when he becomes the target of a spell. He can also exile the top 2 cards of your library, and then you choose one of them until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. Tectonic Giant's one of the best cards in the deck. It's just super useful. Magma Giant, just when it enters the battlefield, deals 2 damage to each creature and each player. That won't kill almost all of the creatures in this deck because giants tend to be big, so that'll be fine. And then Thundercloud Giant, when he enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to the number of giants you control to each non-giant creature, which is a great board wipe, plus he's a 4/4 body. Cinderheart Giant is a trampler that's a 7/6 for 7, and when he dies, he randomly deals 7 damage. The dies trigger isn't that important, but being a 7-mana 7/6 trample is just a good beater to beat face, which is what this deck's trying to do, being a giant tribal deck. So 2 of the 5 cards here, you might notice, don't say giant in the type and subtype line. That's because Awaken the Ancients turns a mountain into a giant, makes it a 7/7 for 4 mana, which is awesome. And then when Molten Echoes enters the battlefield, you'll choose giants, and then whenever another non-token giant enters the battlefield, you get to make a copy of it that has haste, and then you get to exile at the beginning of the next end step. Molten Echoes is amazing because a lot of the giants in this deck have entered the battlefield effects and attack effects. So for example, like Grave Titan, who's in the top left of the screen here, when he enters the battlefield or attacks, you make 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So if Molten Echoes is out, and then you cast Grave Titan, you get his attack and enter the battlefield trigger, which is awesome. Hamlet back Goliath, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you put X/1/1 counters on him, where X is that creature's power. This guy can get huge. And then Borderland Behemoth, 5 mana 4/4 with trample, or 7 mana 4/4 with trample, sorry, which you might not think is a lot of very good stats, but he gets +4/+4 for each other giant you control. He can also get out of hand very fast. And the last 5 giants in the deck are kind of like just generically good cards. Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. He costs 2 mana for a 6/6. When he enters the battlefield or attacks, each opponent discards a card. Then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3 life. He gets sacrificed if you don't escape him, which escape means for him it's pay 4 mana and exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. So as a 2 mana just sorcery essentially, you get to make everyone discard a card, and then later on when you get him back, you get to swing with a 6/6 for 4 mana, where you also get to make people discard cards. He is so powerful. Sunrise Sovereign gives all your other giants +2/+2 and trample to be able to get that damage in so your opponents can't just chump block. Calamity Bearer makes all of your giants deal double damage, which is crazy. War Chief Giant's a 5/3 with haste and myriad, so whenever you attack with him, you make a copy for each other opponent you have, and then they attack as well. So he does 15 damage per swing for 5 mana, which is awesome. And then Writhing Necromass, because your giants are going to be dying because they're going to be threats. As your giants die throughout the game, Writhing Necromass is going to be cheaper and could be a 1 mana 5/5 with Death Touch. These 5 giants are super good, and they synergize all the other giants in really cool ways. So the sub-theme of this deck is because the giants are big and they cost quite a bit, waiting a turn to attack with them can kind of feel bad sometimes, so it's a bunch of haste enabling and then a couple Anthem-like effects to make your giants bigger so that when you swing with them, it'll hurt your opponents really bad. So the Anthem-like effects, you just saw them. Sunrise Sovereign, again giving +2/+2 and trample, is awesome. Ogre Battle Driver gives your giants +2/+0 and haste whenever they enter the battlefield. So the turn they enter, they'll hit a bit harder and they can swing immediately. And then Shared Animosity. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until the end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So say, for example, you attack with 3 giants, all 3 of your giants will get +2/+0. These 3 cards help you just get a ton of damage in. They're awesome. The other 5 cards in the sub-theme are Fervor, Hammer of Perforos, Tuk Tuk Rebel Fort, Bitter Reunion, and Anger. Fervor, Hammer, and Tuk Tuk Rebel Fort all just give you haste without any caveats. Anger gives you haste as long as Anger's in the graveyard and you control a mountain, and Bitter Reunion only gives you haste once because you have to pay one and sacrifice it to give creatures you control haste, but it's also discard a card to draw 2 cards, so it fits multiple roles, which is why it's in the deck, and you'll see it again later in the card draw section. So the synergy category is just 5 cards that synergize with the theme of Giant Tribal and trying to deal a bunch of damage. So Gratuitous Violence doubles all damage your creatures deal. Fiery Emancipation triples all damage you deal. And then Giant's Ire, just if you control a giant, you get to draw a card and it's 4 mana, deal 4 damage to a player. Giant's Ire sucks. It's a really bad card, but I had to add it for the flavor reasons because it's from Lorwyn. I love Lorwyn. It's my favorite set, and I just thought it added a lot of flavor to the deck, even though it's probably one of the worst cards in the deck. The last 2 cards in the synergy category are Patriarch's Bidding and Haunting Voyage. They both let you pick a creature type and then return all creatures of that type from the graveyard to the battlefield. They're both kind of a little bit weak, though, because Patriarch's Bidding lets everybody do it, and then Haunting Voyage costs 9 because you have to pay 2, and then the Foretell cost is 7. You can just cast it for 6, and then you can only return 2, and sometimes you do that. You pay the 6 mana and return 2 of them because that's all you need. But both of these cards, because you're in a tribal deck, they just fit so well. So because this deck isn't as focused on the commander as much because it's a tribal deck and you're kind of more focusing on just dealing damage through combat, you will get Axelrod Gunnarson out to help deal damage and stuff like that, but it's not nearly as focused as my other decks were. There's less protection with only 3. So the 3 protection spells are the classic Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, and my personal favorite protection spell, Kaya's Ghost Form. So while Lightning Greaves gives haste and shroud and Swiftfoot Boots gives haste and hexproof, Kaya's Ghost Form stops your commander from getting killed or exiled. It's whenever, so you 1 mana to enchant a creature or planeswalker you control, and then when the enchanted permanent dies or is put into exile, you return that card from the battlefield under your control, which gets around board wipes and targeted removal and a bunch of other stuff, because cards like Swords of Plowshares and Path to Exile, which are exile effects, are really common in this format. Kaya's Ghost Form gets around those, as well as the board wipes that are just everywhere. So I put 10 draw spells in this deck, some typical red ones that discard and draw, and then some black ones that just draw. I put in a little mixture of both because I like the burst speed you get from the red ones, as well without the life loss that some of the black ones have, but then the black ones don't make you discard cards, so you get better card advantage. So I like a mix of both. So the 3 black draw spells I have in this deck are Night's Whisper, Phyrexian Arena, and Sign in Blood. Night's Whisper and Sign in Blood make you draw 2 cards and then you lose 2 life, while Phyrexian Arena says at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw 1 card and you lose 1 life. I know everyone loves Phyrexian Arena, but I think Phyrexian Arena is a little bit overrated, and I don't put it in any of my black decks unless there's some form of life gain. And because Axelrod Gunnarson's in the deck, and people will end up chunk blocking or whatever, and I have some other effects that let Axelrod Gunnarson kill other creatures with damage, I thought Phyrexian Arena would be fine to put in this deck to negate some, because Axelrod Gunnarsson negates some of the life loss. The burst draw spells that make you discard then draw that I put in this deck are Bitter Reunion, Cathartic Reunion, Tormenting Voice, and Thrill of Possibilities. You saw Bitter Reunion earlier because it's an enchantment instead of a sorcery or an instant, and then you can pay 1 to sack it to give your creatures you control haste until the end of turn, which is amazing. Cathartic Reunion, you have to discard 2 cards, then you draw 3, and then Tormenting and Thrill, you discard 1 card to draw 2. All these cards are great as burst speed. You dump a card out of your hand that you don't need to fill it back up. They're awesome. I love all of these cards. The last 3 draw spells in the draw category are Tectonic Giant, Vanquisher's Banner, and Fire Giant's Fury. Tectonic Giant you saw earlier, letting you exile the top 2 cards of your library, then you choose 1 until the end of your next turn you can play it. It's awesome. Vanquisher's Banner just being a tribal house, giving all of your creatures of the chosen subtype +1/+1, and then whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, you draw a card. It's amazing. And then Fire Giant's Fury, 2 mana, gives target giant you control +2/+2 and trample until the end of turn, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player this turn, exile that many cards from the top of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards. So say you have your, I don't know, like a 6-something giant, you give it +2/+2 and trample, and say someone blocks like a 3/3 to try to like negate some of that, you still get to exile 5 cards, and then you get to play them until the end of your next turn. Fire Giant's Fury is awesome in this deck. It's so good. So the next category is Ramp. And because there's no green in the deck, there's not as much land-based ramp, which is my favorite kind of ramp because It's the safest in a casual commander setting because people aren't going to blow up your basic lands or your generic dual lands. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I like land-based ramp, but unfortunately because black-red, you can't run as many of that. The two land-based ramp I am putting in the deck, though, are Wayfarer's Bauble and Solemn Simulacrum. They're both great because Wayfarer's Bauble is a really cheap way to get a basic onto the battlefield that's colorless, and Solemn Simulacrum, while it does cost 4 to put a basic land from your library onto the battlefield tapped, whenever it dies, it does draw you a card, and it also is just a 2/2 blocker, so Solemn Simulacrum is just a good body to get extra value out of when it dies. These are all of the colorless ramp in the deck. Soul Ring, Worn Powerstone, and Thran Dynamo. Soul Ring and Worn Powerstone both giving you 2 colorless when you tap them, Thran giving you 3. Also, I just find hilarious that Soul Ring costs 1 mana, enters untapped, gives you 2 mana, and then Worn Powerstone costs 3 mana, enters tapped, and gives you 2 mana. Soul Ring is one of the strongest cards ever. I still can't believe we're able to play with it. I know we can play with it in Commander because of how ease of access it is, but it's one of the strongest cards ever printed. It's the power 10. It's crazy. And then Thran Dynamo giving you 75% of your investment back is unheard of. Normally you only get 50% or less, with a Sisay's Ring or Urgolem's Eye being 4 mana and tapping for 2. Thran Dynamo is amazing. And then Worn Powerstone, again, tapping for 2 mana is just great value. These are the colored ramp artifacts in the deck. Arcane tapping for a red or a black. Rakdos Signet turning a colorless into a black and a red. And then Skyclave Relic, 3 mana for an indestructible mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color. But if you pay 6, you get 3 of them that all tap for 1 mana of any color. The 2 copies enter tapped. But yeah, if you can afford the 6, you'll get 3 Skyclave Relics onto the battlefield. It's awesome. So these 2 cards are tribal synergy ramp spells with Herald's Horn. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. It makes that creature type cost 1 less to cast. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you can look at the top card of your library, and if it's a spell of the chosen type, you may put it into your hand. It has to be a creature card of the chosen type. I didn't put it in the draw category because there are only 20 cards in the theme category, and not even all of them are giant creature spells, so you're not going to hit Herald's Horn very often. But it also just helps you cast your commander for 1 cheaper at 7, which is great. And then Stink Drinker Daredevil makes it so that all of your giants cost 2 less to cast for 3 mana, which again, because you have less than 20 actual giant creature cards in the deck, it's not going to be as good. But it says giant spells, and there are 2 tribal giant spells in the deck, so it actually makes them cheaper, which is really nice, and it'll make your commander 2 cheaper. So the next category is removal, which I have 12 of. And all of the removal are giants and themed. I'm not running any of the good black removal because I just wanted the deck to be more thematic than that. So yeah, the removal isn't super fantastic, and I'm not running any of the really efficient good black removal because that just really wouldn't fit the theme of the deck, with the commander being as inefficient as it is. So the 5 giants that are removal, you saw them earlier. I already explained them earlier. Just get to see them again because they fit in the removal category, and they're all so fantastic. Now, these are the removal spells that are very interesting. Crush Underfoot, Fall of the Hammer, and Soul's Fire all let target creature you control deal damage equal to its power to any target. The reason that's important is because if you have Axelrod Gunnarson out and you target your Axelrod Gunnarson with any of these spells and kill one of your opponent's creatures, his ability or trigger, gaining you a life and dealing 1 damage to target player. Like I said, the gaining a life and dealing 1 damage is so minuscule when you start at 40 life, but they synergize with him, and I thought that was really cool. Warstorm Surge let all of your creatures entering the battlefield dealing damage equal to their power to any target, which is amazing. Synergizes with your commander and all the big giants, letting you destroy all of your opponent's creatures. And then Burning Anger, enchanting a creature and then letting them tap to deal damage equal to their power to any target. So once you have Axelrod Gunnarson out, you can throw Burning Anger on him, and then you can every turn tap him to deal 5 damage to a creature, which will more than likely kill one of your opponent's creatures so that you can get his trigger to trigger off, gaining you a life and dealing another damage to any player. The last 2 cards in the removal category are Sarkhan's Unsealing and Cinderheart Giant. Sarkhan's Unsealing says whenever you cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, Sarkhan's Unsealing deals 4 damage to any target. And then whenever you cast a creature spell with a power of 7 or greater, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. So this is removal and a board wipe. It's not going to be a board wipe very often because there's very few 7 power creatures in the deck, but there's a couple, so it is technically a board wipe with massive air quotes around that. And then Cinderheart Giant is removal with massive air quotes around it as well, because it has to die, and then it randomly deals 7 damage to a creature an opponent controls. So it's not great because you don't get to control where the removal is pointed and when it's pointed, but at the same time, it'll still technically removal, so I put it in here. But yeah, these two are... Sarkhan's Unsealing is a conditional wipe, and then Cinderheart Giant is a conditional removal. So now for the board wipes. There's only 4 board wipes in the deck. It's about where I'd want it. One of the creatures you saw earlier that could be considered a board wipe only deals 2 damage to each creature on the board. That'll hose a lot of token decks, but a lot of creatures in the casual commander side have less than 2 power, so I didn't add it to the board wipe. Sometimes it's a board wipe, sometimes it's not, but I just didn't consider adding. I didn't really feel like adding it to the board wipe section. But there are 2 board wipes in the deck that you haven't seen yet that are both fantastic. The 2 board wipes that are fantastic in this deck are Arc Bond and Chandra's Ignition. So Chandra's Ignition says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. If you have Axelrod Gunnarson out, and you Chandra's Ignition on him, you'll get to destroy everything, and then his ability will trigger a lot, which means that you actually get to deal a significant amount of damage with him and actually gain a significant amount of life. Say you're playing up against a token deck and they have like 10 1/1s, you destroy all of them plus whatever ancillary creatures there are around, and you could have Axelrod Gunnarson trigger like 15 times, which is 15 life gain and then 15 damage at people's faces, which is actually a good amount of damage. It makes him actually worth using, which is kind of crazy. And Arc Bond does the same thing, but the creature needs to take damage. So basically you would attack with Axelrod Gunnarson, and then if he ends up being blocked, you go, alright, in response, cast Arcbound, and then you get to do the same thing as Chandra's Ignition for 3 mana instead of 5. Like, yeah, Arc Bond and Chandra's Ignition, both fantastic. And then the 2 board wipes you already saw with Thunder Cloud Shaman and Sarkhan's Unsealing being very it's only a board wipe like for 1 or 2 cards in the deck, so it doesn't super count, but it's 4 damage each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control, so it would actually destroy a lot of stuff versus the 2 damage from the other giant. Now for the lands. As usual, I'm not going to show all the lands. I'm just going to show a couple of the lands that kind of represent the entire mana base as a whole. So the lands in this deck are Castle Embereth, which just is an Anthem effect. Give all your creatures +1/+0 until the end of turn, which is fantastic. I'm not running Castle Locthwain because I'd rather run Bonder's Enclave. You're normally going to have a creature with power 4 or greater out, which lets you draw a card with Bonders. And I don't want to pay the life from Castle Locthwain. Canyon Slough represents, or Slough, I don't know how you'd pronounce that, represents all of the cycling lands. I have 3 of them. I have the 2 monocolored 1-mana cyclers as well as this one, and then Terrain Generator and Fabled Passage. I'm running a lot of fetch lands so that I can color fix consistently, and then Terrain Generator because I'm running 20 basics. I'm running 10 mountains, 10 swamps, so that I can, with Terrain Generator, I can spend the 3 mana, 2 from Terrain Generator, and then tapping itself to put a basic from your hand onto the battlefield is awesome. Path of Ancestry. I put Path of Ancestry in basically every single deck. Even if it's a monocolor deck, if I have enough creatures that have the same creature type as my commander, I'll just run Path of Ancestry, because getting you the Scry 1 for casting a spell that shares or casting a creature spell that shares a creature type with your commander, I think is just so much value. Luxury Suite. Wizards of the Coast. Put Luxury Suite and the rest of the Battle Bonds lands in all the precons they fit in. I don't know why they don't. I know why they don't do it. It's for money reasons. They want to hold them back so they have reprint equity or whatever. But they're designed for multiplayer formats. Put them in the multiplayer formatted pre-constructed decks. Just do it. You know how much credit you would get with the Magic the Gathering community if you just did that? It's crazy. Just put them in all the precons. Ugh. And then Graven Cairns being the filter land. I love the filter lands like this. I think they're really cool. So yeah, that's all of the lands I have in the deck that represent all of them. So now for the maybes. These are the cards that I cut. These are the last couple cards I cut. And the cards that I wanted to put in but just didn't fit. So yeah, these are the almost made the list cards. So Castle Locthwain didn't make the cut because it's like Bonder's Enclave, but its catch is it deals damage to equal the number of cards in your hand. And I'd rather the condition of Bonder's Enclave requiring to have a creature with power 4 or greater out. I prefer that to the damage of Castle Locthwain. Heartless Summonings is super cool. because it makes it so creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast, but it gives each of your creatures -1/-1. With this deck mainly trying to win with like damage and combat damage and all that stuff, giving the creatures 1 power and 1 toughness smaller over the course of a game, I think will hinder you a lot more than the benefit of making creatures cost 2 less to cast would give you like a bonus. Urabrask is another haste enabler. The issue is he costs 5 mana, and all he does is give haste. Now, making your creature's opponents enter the battlefield tapped is insane. I see a lot of people undervalue how powerful that line of text is. I just don't think it's as useful in a deck like this, where giving your creatures haste and your opponent's tapped for 5 mana, I just don't think that is a good enough rate for this deck. It goes great in other decks, just I don't think it fits super well in this deck. Hammerfist Giant, it deals 4 damage to each creature without flying in each player. That means it kills itself, and then it'll kill a bunch of your giants, because a lot of the giants in this deck are like 4/4s or 4/3s or 5/3s or like 5/4s or like whatever, right? So because of that, Hammerfist Giant just destroys your board at the same time, and you're trying to have a lot of giants on board. So yeah, Hammerfist Giant just kind of non-bows, which makes me sad. I wish it dealt 4 damage to each non-giant creature, or like each creature without flying that you don't control, or at least just not kill itself. I don't know why it deals 4 damage to itself when it activates. I just think that's kind of stupid. And then Mirror March being really cool. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you flip a coin until you lose a flip, and then for each flip you win, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste, then you exile them at the beginning of the next end step. I think Mirror March is super cool. Problem is it costs 6 mana, and it can just whiff sometimes, because it's only a 50% chance every time, so I'd rather have like the consistency of something like Molten Echoes at a lower mana cost. So yeah, these are the cards that almost made the cut. So let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of this deck? I think this deck is awesome. Like, I didn't expect I would be building a tribal deck this soon. I honestly thought that was going to come like way later, but it's just that Axelrod Gunnarson's ability doesn't do anything like in a vacuum, and in order to get his ability to do things, you need to have 2 other categories of cards that you can't run enough of to make it consistent enough. With my Arcades deck, the 2 other categories that made Arcades do something, like those cards work alone with Arcades, and then they just power up when you get them next to each other. With Axelrod Gunnarson, any one of those like 2 other categories, the Death Touch category and then the category that lets them like ping stuff, when equipped onto Axelrod or like synergized with them, they don't do anything unless you have both A and B. So yeah, Axelrod Gunnarson's an A plus B plus C, and you need B and C at the same time in order to do something, while Arcades Sabbath is an A plus B or C, while B and C like combo together become even stronger. So yeah, let me know in the comments again. Like, I really want to hear people's thoughts on this deck and like the video. What do you want me to change about the video and all that other stuff? So yeah, I'd love to chat with you down in the comments. These are all my socials. Twitch is where I stream building these decks. I wasn't able to stream a lot this week. I was only able to stream one day, but that's because a bunch of stuff came up and I just wasn't able to be on Twitch. But next week, hopefully I'll be able to stream all 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, building the deck. Yeah, I'm really hoping I'll be able to do that. Twitter is when I post when I go live on Twitch, and when I post these videos, I try to post them every Friday. So hopefully this gets out. TikTok, haven't done anything on TikTok yet. I'm still trying to find time in my schedule in order to make TikTok videos and just like workshop what I want to be doing on TikTok. So if you have any ideas for me, please let me know in the comments what I could do on TikTok. I'm thinking like cool card interactions, or like maybe my initial reaction to the commanders I'm going to be building. I don't know. Just let me know down in the comments what you think I should be doing on TikTok. Reddit, I post when my videos go live on Reddit. And then Archidect, I have all of the deck lists for all of the decks over on Archidect. So yeah, please follow me on all of my socials. So thanks for watching, and as always, get building, splainers. That is so